and welcome to Tax Matters. My name is Pearl Namaka, and with me on the episode is Chiamaka Ohauchi.
Hello viewers.
Today, we are staying with the story of the FIRS Stakeholders Forum held on September 6, 2018, the story of which has come to you in 2 episodes so far. Why are we doing this? We believe that each time this kind of event holds, it serves as a barometer, a gauge of how taxpayers feel. The speakers at such events express in their interventions the issues agitating the minds of taxpayers out there.
And this forum was particularly exciting and rich. There was robust engagement from the floor, with the executive chairman seizing every opportunity to make clarification.
I'm the president of Nigerian Association of Small and Medium Enterprises, simply called NASME, and we want to thank FRIS for a listening ear. We are available to cooperate and collaborate with FRIS in getting our people from informal to formal sector. I would want to start with that. The 2 speakers before me mentioned migrating presumptive tax and migrating also from informal to formal. It's a major issue that I will want to put on the laps of FRIS to see what can we do. Yes, presumptive tax is addressing the problem, but not formally. For instance, if anybody that is not, doesn't have a registered name, cannot benefit from the PPD we are doing on public procurement. We are currently telling our members like that. Even the one back came and they want to bring down to our level for us to participate. But we cannot, many of us cannot, because many of us are not registered. And going by the statistic we have on hand, I know shortly another one is coming out. Out of 36 million MSMEs, 36, as of 37, 36.4 or 0.6 are micro and small. We contribute a huge percentage to GDP. My second point is on the way our members perceive tax and taxation. On different fora, I think Mr. Fowler has demarcated the difference between taxes, fees, and levies. But our people don't understand it that way. So, and of course, when you look at why we must do it, we must now think around that and say, what can we do? Because they are now saying, whether you call it tax or levy, or is it possible to group all these things together and then ask us to have one point of payment instead of having to attend to some, because we are small. Many of us don't even see the reason why they should pay tax. That's the truth.
Mr. President, thank you very much for honoring our invitation. In terms of presumptive tax, it exists, and the state boards of internal revenue use it. They will not insist on audited accounts for small businesses. I don't know whether I should let Lagos State say 1 or 2 words, or Kwara or Kano. We ask them to come from different zones.
On the issue of the informal sector, I believe sincerely that virtually all the state revenue services are aware of the significance of the informal sector, and the problem there is being addressed at the various state level. I can talk about my state because we believe that we cannot capture the entire informal sector without recognizing them under their various associations. And through that kind of arrangement, we have been able to bring them into the tax net, and we are still working in that direction. But our approach has been that we should look at the capacity, because it differs from state to state. So there can't be a general approach towards solving the problem of the informal sector. But more importantly, what we want to put on the table here for consideration, I don't know how that will work, but I believe that it is something that is evolving as a result of our experience. You find various companies that are enterprises mostly anyway, that are operating under the guise of informal sector. But their activities are perhaps even more than what you find in limited liability companies. And because they are under those groups, they tend to want to be treated along with those groups. Any attempt to take them out of it, because they are powerful and they maybe control those associations, then they instigate some kind of crisis, which at least at our own level we manage. But what I have seen is that because of the existence of the association, let me give you an example, the Road Transport Workers Association, which is national. We use them to collect taxes from their members, and it has been very, very efficient because they already have a way of collecting even their association dues. And if we have to use them as a platform to collect taxes, then they are ready to do it. But they do it at a fee. That is, you have to pay them like 10% of the total collections. There's no problem about that. But the point is that we can take it a step further in the sense that if we look at how we have engaged, when I say engaged now, we have engaged employers of labor to deduct payee from their staff and remit, then is it not possible for these associations which are recognized to also be recognized as, the association to collect these taxes and remit to the tax authorities, rather than these different arrangements that we have from state to state? If there's a law in that respect, then it makes the total capture of people in those categories more efficient than what we have presently.
Kano economy is more of informal sector, unlike Lagos that is full of industries. That when we came on board, we decided to pay more emphasis on our informal sector by actually engaging the union, trade union. We have CAS2 in Kano State Trade Union, and NASI, National Association of Small Scale Industries. And when we talk of road transport, there are about 5 or 6. So we actually, instead of engaging consultants, we decided to engage them as our consultants. We call them technical advisors. So we had what is called PPD, Public-Private Dialogue, in the presence of His Excellency, because one of the development partners assisted us in enumerating the trade union members and came up with approved rates in accordance with the line of businesses. Each business has the bigger one, medium, and small one, because we are talking about presumptive tax, whereas a taxpayer does not have record to be assessed. If I can remember, it was actually amended in 2011, Section 36, subsection 6 of Personal Income Tax Act, that actually gave made provision of presumptive tax. So we decided to agree on rates, what is payable in accordance with each line of business. So after we engaged them as technical advisors, they assisted us in enumerating the market trade unions and came up with what is payable.
We've had presumptive tax regime in Lagos State for quite some time, since the time of the chairman here. What we intend to do going forward is to ease payment options for people in the informal sector. Yes, we ask them to pay 5,000, 6,000, whatever, but rather than pay a lump sum of 5,000 with
already introduced possibility of having instruments payments of that amount.
I'd like to also commend the FIRS for the reforms that has taken place in the last few years under the current leadership and the increase in revenue. On the tax to GDP ratio, I think it's an issue that we need to interrogate properly. We need to look at the components of GDP, as one of the speakers said. For instance, agric contributes about 23% to GDP. Agric contributes less than 1% to revenue. So we have to bear that in mind. There are components of GDP whose productivity are very low, so that they are not contributing anything to revenue. So when we just pick a template from global best practice and say GDP revenue ratio, it doesn't apply in this situation. So we need to put that in mind. Then, just as the chairman of NASME said, there are a lot of regulatory pressure on businesses. And just as he said, what we know in business is the burden of the revenue that is moving from private sector to government. Whether it is moving to FIRS, LRS, NAFDAC, customs, it's still movement of resources from private sector to government. So we need to have a holistic view of this thing when we look at the pressure of taxes on government. Regulatory pressure, regulatory fees, renewal fees, licensing fees, it comes to a huge lot on a lot of businesses. So I want to appeal that, again, it's a contextual issue. We have to put all these things in context. I think that is important. Then, talking about the enterprises and the structure of the economy, we have to realize that there are some very critical sectors of this economy that ordinarily should have been in the private sector. If they were in the private sector, we will not be talking about small tax revenue. For instance, if an NNPC was a private sector organization, you can imagine the kind of taxes that you'll be getting into government coffers. We are all aware of the challenges that the states are facing with FAC. They have to postpone their meetings twice or thrice because of accountability issues. So these are also some fundamental issues. Because if we're able to straighten some of these areas, the pressure on those of us in business will be less. And I'm sure even the FIRS may even be making proposals for government to reduce some of these taxes. But again, we have a lot of government institutions that are generating revenue, but that are not remitting to government. I think that is an important issue that I know it doesn't fall within the remit of FIRS, but it's a much larger issue that I think we need to address. Then the issue of harmonization of taxes. Severally, the Joint Tax Board have assured us that taxes will be harmonized across the country. But it has not happened in practical terms. Vehicles still go around the country. They are being taxed from state to state. It's still a nightmare for any business carrying delivery vans, going to deliver things across the country. It's still a problem. So please, I want to appeal to the Joint Tax Board. Theoretically, something has been done. But in practical terms, we still have a lot of issues. Then finally, it's on payee. Now, we have payee which is being collected by the states. Again, I want to put this in context. There are a lot of pressure on the average employee. They have to pay heavily for school fees, which ordinarily governments will have even provided. They have to pay heavily for health care, which to a large extent government will have provided. You have to pay heavily for transportation. You have to pay heavily for housing. And on top of all that, because of the unemployment situation, every employee has a lot of dependents. For every employed person, there are about 5 or 10 dependents. All these things we need to take account of in tax administration. All the allowances and all of that, everything has been overtaken by inflation. And yet, by the time we impose all these things, it puts a lot of pressure. Take Abuja, for instance. How much does a level 12, even a director earn in Abuja? You have to pay, you know what, the accommodation fees to get a 2 or 3 bedroom flat in Abuja. And yet you impose this pay on people. That is what the law says. Yes, what of the reality? So I think we have to put all this in context so that we don't create more problems for the economy. And the tax policy did emphasize that we have to move from direct tax to indirect tax. That is the way to solve all this problem of informal sector going to meet NURC association. If the emphasis was on indirect tax, you tax people as they consume. If you're in informal sector and you are riding an SUV, there must be something you must be paying. It must be commensurate to what you consume. So I want to appeal that we incorporate the spirit of the national tax policy in this drive, that we should move gradually from direct, so that we don't also hurt investment.
We feel what you feel. And as a tax person, a dead business doesn't pay us. We have to make sure that you stay in business so we can continue to collect something. So we're quite aware of the issues that businesses are going through. In terms of the tax to GDP ratio, it's actually the Bureau of Statistics that has that computation with a certain formula. And we'll pass the message on and see if it can be adjusted. But I'm sure they want to rely with international standards, and that might make ours look a bit lower than it should be. But I know they're computing it for, as of last year, and I'm almost certain that there'll be an increase of at least 30%. It might go from 6 to 8 point something, but we'll have to wait for them to give us the final results. Now, in terms of the practicality of your vehicles being stopped, we have members from the states here. We would like to appeal, if any local government, anybody stops your vehicle, ask your people to give us 1 hour. We publicize the numbers of all the state chairmen nationwide. Make a phone call and let them know that they're being harassed. It might cause a delay for your vehicle for 1 hour, but by the time we keep on arresting these people, and they'll see that it can't continue. So we need your support. If there's any such action, even the IG of police even banned all these roadblocks, and we find out a lot of these people are touts. They're not even revenue agents. Please tell your people, what we'll do, we'll republish the numbers of all the state chairmen again, and send it to your organization. So anytime they have a problem, just call the state chairman, or you call the office, the FIRS office. Although it might be a state issue, we will also intervene on your behalf. Then in terms of the reduction in the pay tax, it was reduced, the maximum was reduced from 25 to 24. And when we're looking at pay tax or individual tax, ours still remains one of the lowest in the world. So the issue is what comes first. I think it's time for us to sacrifice a little bit, so governments can provide this infrastructure once and for all. Let us take this as a sacrifice that we're leaving for the next generation of our grandchildren. And that's the only way to look at it. We have to give something to build these roads, to build these hospitals, to build these schools.
Do you provide goods and services? Then you must answer these important questions. Are you registered for VAT? Do you charge VAT on the goods and services you provide? Do you keep records of all your transactions? Do you file VAT returns? Do you remit VAT collected to government coffers? If your answer to any of these questions is no, then you are breaking the law. The law demands total compliance. Therefore, you must register for VAT. You must charge VAT on goods and services. You must file VAT returns. And you must remit all VAT collected on behalf of government within 21 days to the bank nearest to you. To do otherwise is a crime punishable everywhere in the world. VAT is prescribed by the law. Do the right thing. Collect and pay VAT. This message is from the FIRS. It pays to pay your tax.
Lively interaction.
Oh yes, healthy exchanges for a better tax system.
Tax Matters spoke to Mr. Abiodun Aino, Coordinating Director, Domestic Taxes Group at the FIRS, on matters arising.
On the floor today, a few people spoke about the irregularity of tax reforms here. Somebody spoke about the fact that it was 11 years ago that we had the last comprehensive reform of the tax system. What are we doing to ensure that we keep pace with developments?
Thank you very much. We realize that there's a need for us to do a tax reform more frequently than we are doing at the moment. But you recall also that the national tax policy also stayed for a very long time before it was reviewed. This administration has taken it upon itself to review the national tax policy. And like the chairman also mentioned, it's part of the thing that has been agreed by this administration that when they are presenting the budget, a finance bill will also come along to ensure that critical area of our tax legislations are reformed. So presently, yes, it's taken a long time for us to do a reform, but this administration seems to have woken up from the slumber, and you are seeing that we are carrying out a review of a lot of our legislation now, and you will begin to see maybe from this next budget, finance bill accompanying our budget to reform aspect of our taxes. So that's very much in focus.
We also have problems with taxing digital economy. People buy things online, pay online. We know that is a universal problem, but then the world is moving ahead. What are you doing at the FRS to tax the digital economy?
Well, I'm happy you recognize that it's a global challenge, and it's also being addressed as at the global level. At the United Nations, at the OECD, it is being addressed. But let's come back home and say, what are we doing? What we have done so far is the automation of the VAT collection in various sectors of the economy, which covers both the formalized economy and the shadow economy that we call the informal sector. Now, with this automation of VAT collection, it will surely reduce the evasion of VAT in this particular sector. It may not be able to do all that we want to achieve as we are moving with the rest of the world to ensure that we bring this digitalized economy to the tax net. However, it's going to go a long way, because what we're doing, we're working with some of those critical agencies like NIPS, that when you make a payment through the POS system, we can have a track of it, and then we're able to take the VAT that's relevant to those transactions. So we are working with those payment gateways, and we believe that very soon you begin to feel the impact. While we are not where we want to be, we are working at both national and international level, but we're also not folding our arms at the moment. So we are doing automation of VAT, and we are working with various and critical agents of government to ensure that we can bring them to the tax net.
Finally, sir, oil taxes versus non-oil taxes. We have always had this plan to make sure that we generate more from non-oil. How well are we doing?
We are not where we want to be, but we are surely and definitely not where we used to be. Before now, oil taxes used to account for about 80% of our total tax collection. We since shifted the paradigm, and in the last 2 years, our average was about 65 to non-oil and 35 to oil. This year thus far is not that high, maybe because again there has been an increase in oil prices. We are still, but notwithstanding, non-oil is still much higher than oil taxes collection. And we think that by the time the year ends, it's not going to be anything less than about 60% to non-oil and say maybe maximum of 40% to oil taxes. So we are pushing forward, and we think we'll get there very soon.
We do hope that once again we have been able to sow seeds of knowledge in you, our viewers. Knowledge that will set you free and make you tax-compliant citizens of our great country. See you next week.
Remember, it pays to pay your tax. Bye for now.